You believe the United States is the richest country in the world, right? Now, answer me this. Would a truly rich country have a debt of $36 trillion? More than the entire annual GDP of China, Japan, and Germany combined? And what if I told you that this debt isn't an accident, but rather the very essence of American power? Today, you're going to find out why the planet's biggest debtor still commands the global economy and how that affects everything from the museums you visit to the wars you see on the news. U.S. debt surpassed $36 trillion in June 2025. To give you an idea, that represents about 122% of the American GDP. The federal government now spends over $1 trillion just paying interest on that debt, according to data from the journalist's resource. It's the second largest item in the budget, behind only Social Security, and surpasses spending on healthcare, education, and even war veterans. Here's the paradox. While the debt explodes, the U.S. dollar remains the most powerful currency on the planet. In 2024, 58% of all international reserves held by central banks worldwide were in dollars, according to the Federal Reserve. The euro came in second with only 20%, and China's currency, the yuan, represented a mere 2%. How can such a heavily indebted country keep its currency on top? The answer lies in Washington, D.C., home to the U.S. Department of the Treasury. Every day, investors from all over the world buy U.S. government bonds, the famous Treasury bonds. These securities are considered the safest assets on Earth. Foreign investors hold around $9 trillion in treasuries, representing 32% of the total in circulation. China alone holds $869 billion, but that confidence isn't eternal, and geopolitical rivals know it. And this is where the story gets really interesting. If you want to help me keep making these videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit the like button. It motivates and helps me keep bringing videos in this format. Let's go back to 2008. The collapse of Lehman Brothers in New York triggered the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. The Federal Reserve's response was dramatic, cutting interest rates to near zero and printing money on an unprecedented scale. Over the following years, the Fed injected trillions into the economy through a program called quantitative easing. Then came 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic shut down the global economy. The U.S. Congress, still in Washington, passed the CARES Act, a stimulus package worth $2.2 trillion. Between 2020 and 2021, U.S. debt rose by $7 trillion in just 2 years, according to records from debt.org. Here's the scary part. More than 26% of the entire U.S. monetary base was created after 2020, according to an analysis by the Mises Institute. That means a quarter of all dollars in existence today were literally created in the past 5 years. Think about that for a second. This monetary expansion had real consequences. Inflation skyrocketed, hitting 9% in 2022, the highest rate in 40 years. The purchasing power of the American middle class melted away. A family in Detroit or Phoenix that had saved money watched their savings lose value. Meanwhile, those who owned stocks and real estate got richer because those assets appreciated with all that new money flowing through the system. But there's something economists don't tell you on TV, and you need to know it now. The Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, based in Washington, D.C., made some alarming projections. By 2035, interest payments on the debt will consume 4.1% of the entire U.S. GDP. According to a report by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, to put that into perspective, in 2026, the government will pay around $1 trillion in interest. By 2035, that number jumps to $1.8 trillion. What does that mean in practice? Less money for everything else. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities recorded that in 2024, interest already accounted for 13% of all federal spending. That's money that doesn't go to schools in Nebraska, doesn't build bridges in Oregon, doesn't fund cancer research in Boston, and there's more. American culture is paying the price. In 2025, the House of Representatives in Washington proposed cutting 35% of the budget for the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Each agency would lose $72 million, dropping from $207 million to $135 million, according to data from Arts Midwest. For Midwestern states like Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri, these cuts are devastating. Rural communities, which represent 20% of the population receive only 7% of all private philanthropy. Community theaters in small Illinois towns, museums in Montana villages, orchestras in Kentucky all depend on that federal money to exist. When debt interest consumes the budget, art dies first. But the real battle isn't happening in American theaters. It's happening in Beijing and Moscow. America's debt isn't just a domestic problem. It's a matter of national security and global power. During the Cold War, Washington spent fortunes competing with Moscow. The space race, nuclear missiles, military bases around the world, all of it was financed through deficit spending. In the 1980s, under President Reagan, tax cuts combined with increased military spending made the debt jump to $2.7 trillion in 1988. Wars are also expensive. The American Civil War, from 1861 to 1865, made the debt explode from $65 million to $2.6 billion. World War II raised it to $285 billion. More recently, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq lasting 2 decades were paid for with borrowed money. Today, China sees this reliance on credit as a strategic weakness. In Shanghai and Shenzhen, Chinese economists argue that the U.S. is trapped. It must keep the dollar strong to attract investors, but that makes its exports expensive and destroys industrial jobs. It's the famous Triffin dilemma. The Atlantic Council, based in Washington, observed that America's share of global GDP fell from 20% in 2000 to around 15% in 2024. Meanwhile, the BRICS, led by China and Russia, are promoting alternative payment systems that bypass the dollar. They want to undermine America's ability to use financial sanctions as a weapon. But is de-dollarization really possible? The answer might surprise you. Despite all the talk about de-dollarization, reality is stubborn. The International Monetary Fund, based in Washington, D.C., notes that the dollar's share of global reserves has been gradually declining, but there's no sign of an accelerated collapse. Reserves are shifting mainly towards smaller country currencies and commodities like gold, not toward the yuan or the ruble. Why? Because there's no reliable alternative. The U.S. Treasury bond market is the most liquid and deep in the world. You can buy or sell billions in treasuries at any time without moving the price much. Try doing that with Russian or Chinese bonds, and you'll find there aren't enough buyers. Moreover, the global financial system is built around the dollar. Banks in London, Tokyo, Frankfurt all use dollars for international transactions. Oil contracts are priced in dollars. The SWIFT banking messaging system, which processes trillions in transfers daily, operates mainly in dollars. China would love to replace the dollar with the yuan, but it has a problem. Beijing tightly controls its currency and financial system. International investors don't trust a government that can change the rules anytime it wants. For the yuan to become a global reserve currency, China would have to open its economy in ways the Communist Party isn't willing to. Even cryptocurrencies don't threaten the dollar. Stablecoins, digital currencies pegged to the dollar, had a market value of $220 billion in April 2025, according to the Federal Reserve. But notice the detail. These coins are pegged to the dollar. They actually reinforce the dollar's dominance, not replace it. Yet this supremacy comes at a price Americans are starting to feel at home. Imagine the United States in 2035. If the CBO's projections are right, the federal government will be spending more on interest payments than on the entire national defense budget. Every dollar that goes to Wall Street to pay creditors is a dollar that doesn't go to fixing roads in Michigan, training teachers in California, or researching renewable energy in Texas. The choices will get harder. Politicians in Washington will have to decide between raising taxes or cutting benefits. Social Security and Medicare, the programs that sustain retired Americans, will face immense pressure. The generation born after 2020 will inherit a bill they didn't help create. There's an interesting historical precedent. In 1835, under President Andrew Jackson, the United States paid off its entire debt. It was the only time in American history that ever happened. Jackson passionately believed debt was immoral and dangerous. He sold public lands, vetoed infrastructure projects, and managed to wipe out the national debt. But what happened next? Without the discipline of federal debt, state banks began printing money recklessly. The economy panicked in 1837, one of the worst depressions of the 19th century. The lesson was clear. Zero debt isn't necessarily good. What matters is how debt is used. Today, no one is proposing to wipe out U.S. debt entirely. The question is it sustainable? And sustainable for whom? Let's return to the question from the beginning. Why does the world's biggest debtor still command the global economy? Because U.S. debt isn't weakness. It's power. It's the ability to mobilize resources instantly. It's having the world so invested in your success that no one can afford to let you fail. Think of it like this. If you owe the bank $10,000, you have a problem. If you owe the bank $10 billion, the bank has a problem. The United States owes the world $36 trillion. The world can't let America go broke because that would break the entire world. But that privilege has an expiration date. Every irresponsible fiscal decision in Washington, every dollar printed to cover a deficit, every war financed by debt chips away at global trust. The dollar's supremacy is like a trust bank account. You can withdraw from it for decades, but if you withdraw too much, too fast, one day the account runs dry. The ever-growing debt isn't just numbers on a Treasury report in Washington, D.C. It's the future of social programs, the survival of art in small towns, and the balance of power between Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. It's the difference between the United States remaining the indispensable power or becoming just another empire that didn't know when to stop spending. The next time you hear that America is the richest country in the world, remember, wealth and debt are two sides of the same coin, and no one knows which side will face up when that coin stops spinning.